Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvi Shavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. I am continuing to fix things here. Okay, so we are continuing on with this series of verses on the encomium. And if those of you who are new have joined this class thinking that it's specifically about the practice of meditation, it's not exactly that. Everything in the way that we learn and teach in SRV, the main issue for us is the destruction of ignorance of who we really are, what our true nature is. And in Vedanta, we talk about Atman and Brahman, that Brahman, the all-pervasive, pure conscious awareness, who is existence, knowledge, and bliss, absolute, and the apparently individualized soul, the Atman, are one and the same. That's the final conclusion of the Vedanta, of the Upanishads, and of the seers of India. And so everything that we can do that removes the coverings over this knowledge is what is going to lead us bit by bit, step by step, to easier, more accessible meditation. And actually, when we talk about meditation, in the classic sense, meditation is not what most people are doing. Most people are are contemplating, are trying to calm the mind, trying to calm the body even, and calling this meditation. But true meditation is when one idea absorbs the attention of the practitioner to the point where it's like the pouring of oil from one vessel to another. The flow of thought is just smooth and constant without splashing. And so we have this verse out of the Bhagavad Gita that says, like a candle set in a windless place, its flames steady and unflickering, so too is the mind of the yogi or the yogini, who has fixed their attention upon the Atman, and the mind is steady, absorbed, and unwavering. And so in order to get to that, we have to calm down the flow of thought in the mind. And where does this flow of thought comes from? Well, in most of us, it comes from desires. It comes from projecting into the future and brooding upon the past. And all of that takes place because we haven't yet convinced ourselves that we are this Atman, this pure spiritual identity that is not matter, energy, or thought. And so because of that, we think we are this psychophysical being. And so all these desires line up and activate, and we have these habits and those habits and these preferences and these aversions, etc. And all of this riles up the mind. So in the practice of Vedanta, in the teachings of the Vedanta, we're learning this practice of discrimination between what's eternal and what's non-eternal. What is the Atman? What is not the Atman? Or we can say, what is the true self and what is not, and then abiding with what the reality truly is. So that takes me back to our class. So what our class is about, what Anurag's class on the other Wednesday in studying the Gita, it's about taking away this ignorance, dissolving it through knowledge, and in that way, making meditation more and more accessible. And then the other part of Vedanta is that we hear these teachings, we study them from the revealed scriptures, we hear them from the great ones, and then we contemplate them over and over and over again. And then we realize them in time by applying them. So we will launch in now. So let me pull up on the screen the verses that we have been studying. And we're going to not start at the beginning like we have been, because there are 58 of these, and we are today taking up number 6. But when we look at teachings of this kind, we can look at them, we might be tempted to just take each teaching one at a time, and we will do that. But we can also look at them in terms of the overall meaning and the deeper meaning, the connected meaning, and as well as how it fits in the context of the verse before and the verse after. So it's good when we do our studies to look at it in all those different ways. So last time, not last week, because it's been like, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks since we worked on these verses, we were looking at verse 5. And this is where the seer of this hymn of enlightenment, this encomium, praise for self-effort, this is where he says, or she says, coming to know of people's attachment to lower knowledge, I perceived 2 types of ego, lower and higher, the kind that binds and the kind that is more of the witness and liberates. Seeking maturity, I plunged into the 2 great philosophical streams to be free of ownership and agency. Because what is it that the ego does for us? It makes us attached. The lower ego is all about I, me, and mine. It's ownership, it's agency. I am the doer of my actions. I am the reaper of the results of my actions. I'm attached to what those results might be. And on top of that, I'm in dread of if they don't go right. And all of this riles up the mind, whereas the higher ego is really more the witness. And we looked at the witness last time in these 3 different ways, the lowest, the middling, which gives us some detachment and makes us more of a witness of what's going on, and then the param ahamkara, which is the supreme witness, which is really identical with, depending upon your temperament, the cosmic divine personality or Brahman itself. So what he did next was that to seek maturity, he plunged into the 2 great philosophical streams to be free of ownership and agency. He's seeking maturity of his ego, or she is, and the 2 great philosophical streams are really the Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion of India, in toto. Let's put it that way. So let me go ahead and change up a different chart here. And this is what we looked at last time, the natural unity of the Sanatana Dharma. How do we put it? Of Vedic religion and philosophy. And the point here is that religion and philosophy were never separated. And so you could be following a philosophical stream of a particular school that really appeals to you, but you might have a different kind of chosen ideal. And this will come up in today's verse too. So you might have your chosen ideal might be Jesus. It might be Divine Mother. It could be Shiva. For those of us in the Ramakrishna lineage, it would be Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother. So all these different divine incarnations, gurus, gods and goddesses, any one of those might be our own a special thing, our own spiritual ideal. And that's our connection to our innermost reality within. And at the same time, we might be following yoga. We might be following the path of Samkhya. We might be following Vedanta, which kind of, in this day and age, the Neo-Advaita combines Samkhya and yoga and also Tantra. So, so you can see that how by following this hugely comprehensive approach to spirituality, that it really would refine the mind, refine the ego, etc. So that's what he was doing. So now let's take a look at the context. So today's verse that we're going to take up, let me bring back that other chart, is 6. Moving about in wonder, the threefold miseries next revealed their various pitfalls to me. But the ultracosmic Trinity came forth and saved me as I performed the 3 alluring offerings. Again, those who are new, this is a 58 verse stotram or hymn or poem on in praise of self-effort. So in every single verse, there is an obstacle that's pointed out, maybe more than one obstacle. And then there are solutions to potential solutions, all out of this Sanatana Dharma, this eternal Dharma of India. So when we look at this verse in context, we see that looking at it in terms of what's going on, what happened in verse 5, we see that the seer observed how most people are attached to lower knowledge. Why? Because it satisfies earthly desires. But the trick is, which he also learned in verse 4, is that these earthly desires, which are natural, most of them, are, and when I say most of them, what I'm saying is, aside from those kinds of strange, aberrant desires that come up for domination, violence, etc., but ordinary, earthly, conventional desires, they can't really be satisfied except through the Dharma, because in trying to satisfy them without putting Dharma or spiritual practice or a divine life first, whatever your particular path is, then it's like pouring oil on fire. It just expands. And so there won't be any quenching of the desire. The only way to quench desire is to begin to transcend. And that's what Dharma gives us. It gives us the ability to to get above, to become the witness. So it's in the 4 fruits of life. So Dharma's first, and then satisfaction of wealth, satisfaction of sensual desires that are in accord with Dharma, and then finally moksha. So it's only by putting Dharma first that our desires will be fulfilled and then be transcended. And so in this process, he saw that the distinction between lower and higher egos was laid bare, and how the lower ego, the one that's all about I, me, and mine, entraps one in the sense of ownership and agency, along with all the karma that leads to. So every action that is performed with a sense of agency, personal agency, and attachment or aversion to the results leads to karma. Any action that is performed with desire leads to karma. And it can be actually good karma, but mostly it's mixed karma and negative karma. And so this is what the lower ego entraps us with. And so, therefore, he plunged into those two great philosophical streams of Vedanta and Tantra, of Veda and Tantra, to gain maturity. So now looking at verse 6 as a whole, which you can still see on your screen, we see that having immersed himself in, or herself, in these two great streams, he then saw how the threefold miseries, which is a teaching out of the Samkhya philosophical teaching, which we saw here out of Samkhya, the threefold miseries shows up in Samkhya. It revealed to him the pervasiveness of universal suffering, which he knows is the result of people's attachment and preoccupation with lower knowledge and the lower ego and all the karma it brings. But then take a look. He sees this, and when we think about the pervasiveness of universal suffering, the the sufferings and the threefold miseries here, I'll just give you a preview, it contain, all the sufferings that arise from within, from the mind, from the physical sufferings of the body. And the second one has to do with other beings, sufferings that arise from other beings, especially other human beings. And then the sufferings that come from on high or come from cosmic forces. So this is pervasive. We are in every moment of our lives dealing with any one of those or all of them all at once. So in seeing that, he reaches for God. He reaches for God. He reaches for that which transcends it in order to identify with it. So these purifying and maturing practices of devotion, which are those three alluring offerings, he engages in those. So, it's not just philosophy, it's also practice. And these practices of devotion are very, very good at ripening the ego and helping one engage in self-surrender. And so he does this. And as she does this, the connection with the cosmic and the inner deity and all the great divine incarnations becomes palpable. And so by doing this grants him salvation, which is, not exactly liberation, but salvation is this growing attachment to God and detachment and forbearance of the world with its karmas and all its pleasure and pain, and thus gaining equanimity and spiritual joy. So that's taking the verse as a whole. Now we will launch into taking it bit by bit. And the next thing we're going to take a look at is the threefold miseries. So let me set up my screen here. The Sanskrit for this is Tri Vidham Dukkam, the three kinds of suffering. And we see here that the first kind that I mentioned before, Adhyatmika, is caused by the mind, and that contains both mental suffering and physical suffering. Because Vedanta is a mind-only school. What that means is that the seers saw that everything comes out of the mind. So we have a mind, we have a body. The body comes out of the mind. The mind is more subtle. And all diseases exist in seed form in the mind. Those of you who hopefully attended the class last Sunday with Babaji, he went through a chart that he went through this chart on the destruction of disease, and he went through it in great detail. There is a chart that precedes this one that we're going to use today. And it touches on everything that Babaji spoke about in much more detail than you'll see in the chart. So I recommend that everybody go and go up on our YouTube channel and see and watch that class. But this shows how diseases of the mind and then and how it starts out with. It starts with the absence of discriminative wisdom. So everything that we experience in the mind, different kinds of suffering like desire, jealousy, passion, greed, fear, shame, pride, uh, and all their evolutes, and all the things that we brood on because of the sense of agency and ownership, the sense of separation, all of these are existing in the mind. And how does this happen? So in this particular chart, we say that the disease is associated with rebirth. In other words, we've come back to this earth, we've taken a body because we have things to work out. And the reason we have things to work out is that we haven't engaged in the discrimination between what is eternal and what is non-eternal. We have not gained mastery over our senses and over the objects that the senses engage in. So when we don't have that control over the senses, then attachment and aversion are at play, karmas are at play. And so this leads to ordinary disease in the body. So when we have the absence of discriminative wisdom, this leads to mental delusion, okay? Thinking that I'm a body and everything that happens to the body, thinking that I am just this limited mind and ego, and therefore all the emotions are mine, all the emotions are real, and that I have to contend with them and suffer them. All of this is part of not knowing who we are. And so this mental delusion leads to mental disease, and it leads to negative thoughts. All of this, they're happening together, really, leading to negative thoughts and actions, leading to karmas, and leading to physical diseases. So let's take a look at this process of the rising and falling of disease, how this actually happens according to Lord Vashishta, and it also accords with the teachings of Patanjali, who's considered the father of the yoga system. So mental agitation weakens the nervous system, and we have all experienced that. We've experienced how when something challenges us and we feel that rush of adrenaline, right? Then this is agitation of the nervous system, mental agitation, which leads to weakening of the nervous system, especially if we're constantly in this fight or flight mode. The prana, the energy that runs through the nerves of the body, gets arrested and fails to pervade the body. And we can think about this, how when something bothers us greatly, disturbs us greatly, all of a sudden we stop breathing, right? So, so the prana gets arrested, and we experience that first in the breath. And if we find that we're constantly holding our breath, then this prana is not circulating throughout the body. It also makes us even more prone to negative thoughts and actions that lead to karmas. So then the prana vibrates at an unequal rate. The nerves quiver. This is both the subtle nerves and then the nerves actually of the body that the medical profession can see. The nerves quiver, causing the body to weaken. Breathing becomes uneven and the body begins to shake. When we eat food in this state, it turns to poison in the system, according to these ancient seers and what they observed in others. And I think we can also we've experienced this ourselves too. If we eat when we're upset, how that feels in the body, then energy from food is stymied and disease sets in. So this is how the mind relates to the diseases of the body. So let's look at the cure and the solution too. Babaji also went over these things, that for this essential disease that leads us back into rebirth, the solution is Atmagyan, and that's Sanskrit for knowledge of the true self. And so we want to study, we want to hear, we want to reflect on these teachings that show us the nature of the self, how it is eternal, how it is all pervasive, how it transcends the body and the mind, the emotions. It transcends the ego. It is unmoving and unaffected by anything. So this Atmagyan is what is going to just give us wisdom and lead to sense control. And as we get more and more imbued with the knowledge and focus on that more and more about the nature of the Atman, then we're less and less interested in chasing after desires because they're so secondary to the bliss of the self. So, but if we're having to start with diseases of the body, then we work on purification of the thought. And we focus on the mantra that the teacher gives us, and we think about the meaning of it. We contemplate it. We use it as the gateway to experiencing our chosen ideal within, which leads us to realization of the Atman. And finally, there's always medicine, but medicine without going back to these other solutions is very temporary. So we want to reform the mind. We want to purify the mind. So that's mental suffering. And in this particular chart that Babaji put together for us a long time ago, and there's a color version in Footfalls, which I think somebody probably just posted. He also talks about how we do it. So if we have passion, so these are the things that are riling up our mind and causing mental suffering. If it's passion, then we seek to control it. Now, this control is often assumed by Western people to be suppression, and that we're supposed to actually let it all out. Well, letting it all out doesn't always help, doesn't, and will not, and if it has any kind of bearing on relief, it's only temporary. So the control we want is the kind of control that's offered back to our chosen ideal or in search of the truth. So we control our passion in order to lead to meditation, and to lead to peace of mind. If we have anger, then we reach for compassion and offer compassion. If we have attachment, we work with self-analysis. Those of us in SRV have practiced the dissolution of the mind system, where, which is a meditation all of its own, where we go through the 5 elements and the 10 senses, and we go through the different aspects of the mind, and we fold them back into each other. We dissolve them into the next most subtle. And if you want to know more about this, just reach out later. So this self-analysis, which also includes discrimination between what's eternal and what's non-eternal, this self-analysis will show us that our attachments are unfounded, unnecessary, and unreal. Then fear. We also apply this looking at evolutes and origins, and we trace everything back to the Atman, which is ever free and never bound, which is one without a second. And all of these things are engaged in through study of the scripture and study with one's teacher. If we have jealousy, we practice generosity. If we have depression, it's usually over not having something that we want. We practice non-attachment. And then, as we saw before, in the aspect of physical suffering, it is cured by discriminative wisdom, discriminating between the eternal and the non-eternal, between the self and the not self. And also practical regimens, proper eating, proper breathing, proper rest, proper activity, and also finally forbearance. And in the yoga system, Patanjali says, in the case of physical sufferings that cannot be done away with, then we just keep our minds close to Brahman, to the source. So now the second part of the teachings of the three kinds of suffering is caused by other beings. It is cured by self-abidance and perseverance. And let's just jump ahead to this next one, because we're going to go into these in a little bit more detail too. So adibhaudika, caused by other beings, and adidaivika, caused by natural forces. And it's cured by transcendence via spiritual practices. So let's go into a little more detail with these. So the other thing to know when we talk about these three sufferings, three kinds of suffering, is that karma has much to do with it, individual and collective karma. And some of the teachings that are being presented today are the result of are from a chapter of a manuscript that is unpublished that Babaji wrote. And it's the chapter on the threefold miseries. And he writes, understanding the law of karma is one of the keys which must be utilized in both mental and physical healing before any appreciable progress can be made. And it is the spiritual approach which is missing in this area. It is ignorance that is a main ingredient in the mind's susceptibility to illnesses of various kinds. A mind that is in the dark of its true origin and inherent power is at the mercy of all types of forces over time and subject to mental worries, occupational stresses, overexertion, overstimulation, desires, attachments, poor habits, and eating and exercise simply breaks down and opens the person to the power of suggestion existing as the seed idea in the mind. So now this sentence is very important. It's got a lot of elements to it, but it ends with this idea that as we open ourselves up to all these different things, desires, attachments, poor habits around eating and exercise, we become open to the power of suggestion existing as the seed idea in the mind. And, if you remember or you still watch TV, you know that you see all these ads for different drugs and whatnot. I remember back in the 60s and the 70s that they started showing all these different over-the-counter drugs that you could use for cold, or the flu season is coming up, so let's all get the flu. And this was the power of suggestion. And, to use a personal example here, when there was a time in the life of my family where we were always sick, and we were leading a very, very conventional life. Well, then there was a change. We shifted over. We went into um, the power of positive thinking through the Church of Religious Science. And we started hearing about how the self is God. And we started hearing that it wasn't necessary to be sick. And so these are powers of suggestion as well. And from the moment we made that shift, we basically stopped getting sick every winter and at other times. Other people might be sick around us, but we didn't fall sick. And so, when I read this that Babaji wrote, I know that it's true from my own direct experience. He goes on, a spiritual life is the only healthy life. An illumined being, or one who is maintaining a disciplined practice at various levels, lives generally free from disease. And even if disease visits, the mind's focus on higher truth thwarts its intrusion and alleviates it, unless there is some definite reason for its presence, such as the working out of others' karma. An example of that would be like Sri Ramakrishna contracting cancer of the throat, or Jesus and his experience of adibaudica suffering coming from other human beings and being on the cross. Was his mind stuck there? No, he was singing songs to God, to the Almighty Father. So what else does this adibaudica, this suffering arising from other beings, include? It includes animals, insects, and especially other human beings. And it's not just outright violence, but also selfishness, greed, exploitation, the desire to dominate in the world, the desire to conquer. So how are we to deal with it? One of the things that Babaji points out is that the golden rule, do unto others, or I like the negative version of this, do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you. But there's also the positive version, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That this should be brought back into vogue and be taught. And it's still one of the most beneficial things that we can do when implemented into human thoughts and action. The other ways to deal with it is forbearance. And this is one of the virtues that has to be cultivated. Forbearance of pain and pleasure, heat and cold, and self-abidance. Now, this is self with a capital S, which refers to the Atman. So, reminding oneself about the ever detached and ever unaffected state of the Atman and abiding in that. But it should also be known that individual and collective karma are at play here. So, this is a study all on its own, and maybe we'll do that sometime. We'll take up these threefold miseries and universal suffering and talk about individual and collective karma and kind of meld that teaching together. So now here's the next one. And this one is very, very interesting. And it's a little harder for Westerners to wrap our minds around. And it can even sound a little bit, well, I'll wait and say that later. So this is the one that's caused by natural forces. And it can be harder to accept or understand. And it emanates from regions beyond the five senses where powerful forces are at play in the many-tiered creation. So we also have to think that when we talk about caused by natural forces, it's not just on the physical realm. Everything here has come out of subtle and more subtle realms. And so that's what is meant by this many-tiered creation. So in India's sacred mythology and history, we hear a lot about different gods and goddesses. And here I'm talking about the ones that are the personifications of the five elements and the 10 senses of the mind, and how they are warring with the asuras. So those would be the suras, the gods, and then the asuras, who are not the gods, but are like demigods. They're always warring with each other's. And when we say that these forces are the forces on high, which are the adidaivika, that are causing suffering, when we anthropomorphize them, then it sounds like superstition. But when we look at this in terms of how human beings have desires for enjoying the five elements, we want the things of the earth. Uh, we want to see, taste, touch, smell, hear beautiful and wonderful things. So we want to use our senses to enjoy all these things that the senses can touch. Well, when we anthropomorphize that, it sounds like superstition. But when we look at it in terms of the tattvas, these cosmic aspects, then it begins to make sense that um, that if we're under the control of our senses, then we're also under the control of the elements, right? And what we know as fact is that the Atman transcends all of that and is actually the source of all of that. And these desires to reach out and experience all those things, not just here on earth, but in the mind and in heavens, etc. Uh, this is creating karma and relationships with these forces. So, just as an example, and because it's fun to tell a story, there's this great story out of the sacred mythology, or the itihasa, sacred history of India, where there was a sage, and the sage had undergone a vow of vrata to not eat or drink for some period of time, a long time. And unlike those more asuric beings who would engage in that in order to gain power, he wants power over everything, or power over enemies. He was engaging in it for the glory of God, as an offering to his chosen ideal, his divine spiritual ideal. And so he made it through the whole thing, keeping his focus on God. So it wasn't just a matter of suffering hunger and suffering thirst. It was a matter of being able to transcend the body's urgency over those things, to detach and keep the mind on God. So he succeeded at that. And so when the end of his vow came, and he brought together some food and some water to break his fast, the gods, those anthropomorphized or personified elements and subtle elements and all the senses and the powers of the mind, these different cosmic forces, they were all like, oh no, we can't let him do this. He'll have power over us. We can't let him have power over us. And so they hit upon a plan. And so they start sending one of their group down one at a time to obstruct his vow. So when he had just finished a prayer and the blessing over the food. And just as he was about to reach out and have the first morsel, a holy man comes by. This holy man is actually one of those gods who took that form to test him. And so the holy man comes by, he salutes him, Om Namo Narayanaya, and he says, I am so hungry. Please, sir, would you share your meal with me? And without skipping a beat, of course, the sage offered half his food to the holy man. And the holy man ate it and went away. And the sage, again, he just glorified his chosen ideal for this opportunity to serve him in the form of this holy man. And so the gods quickly send down another person. And this is a beggar, and with all his ribs showing. And the beggar comes and says, "Oh, great sage, I am so hungry. I'm about to die. Please feed me." And so the sage joyously gives him all the food that he had left. And the man eats it and goes away. And the sage glorifies the Lord that he got to serve him in the starving man. And he thinks to himself afterwards, glory to God. Well, one can break one's fast with water. And as he reaches for his cup to drink the water, a scrawny, bedraggled dog comes by. And you have to know that in India, the dog was kind of considered a very, very low creature, one you would not even touch necessarily. And the dog comes by and shows that it needs water badly. And so, glorifying God, he reaches out and gives the bowl of water to the dog, and the dog laps it all up. So at that point, all the gods come down and they salute and bow down to this man because he transcended all their designs, all their desires for pleasure through the use of the five senses and their engagement with the elements in this man. So this is really a very profound story, and it shows us how this self-control is really important and essential to our spiritual practice. So he transcended at that point, he transcends all three aspects of suffering. He has transcended the suffering of the body through hunger and thirst. He's transcended the ability of other beings to cause him harm. He's transcended the power of the cosmic forces to have any power over him. So most of you did not join the arati that we had. And I just want to treat us all to a beautiful poem that is sung in Jaima music, and a couple of you have heard it, but we can just listen to it again because it epitomizes this spiritual practice of devotion and surrender and transcendence and self-control, all of that. So here we go. Well, I've just been informed that we don't have sound. I don't understand that. I've got my share sound going. I'm so sorry, everybody. I guess that means we didn't have music at the beginning, too. Well, I would just tell everybody to look at go up on Spotify or wherever your streaming service is and listen to Shukir Vashana Karo Arkadin by Babaji Bob Kindler on the Jaima music album, Kali Bol. If I can recite it, it's, oh, wait a minute. I can read it. I happen to have it here. O friend, for how long will you cling to this empty desire for earthly happiness? Give up these vain thoughts and idle talk, and for as many days that are left to you in this life, chant Kali, Kali, Kali. Then, when you receive the blessed feet of Brahman as your eternal treasure, you will remember this very important day. Obtaining this precious treasure, creation, preservation, and destruction, as well as the various gods and goddesses, will be under your control. Misery and misfortune will come if you do not chant the divine names. But even if misery comes, remember the Mother is supreme. Whatever happens, know it to be her will and surrender yourself completely. Bewildered by Maya, Kamalakanta has forgotten the 9 months and 9 days of suffering in his mother's womb. Misery and pain are the outcome of limited existence. How many more lives of ignorance can I bear? Well, so we have just a few minutes left, and we only got through the first teaching. I'm glad we did kind of an overview of the verse, because I don't think it's a good idea to launch into the next teaching. We'll take that up the next time. But if there's any questions or comments, um, I'm opening up the floor. Okay, well, I guess it's all very, very clear. Um, so let's go back then and look one more time at these verses so that we can take them with us. And contemplate them. Moving about in wonder, the threefold miseries next revealed their various pitfalls to me. But the ultra-cosmic trinity came forth. Now, just jumping to the chase, this ultra-cosmic trinity is Ishvara, the personal God, Avatar, the divine incarnation, and Ishta, the chosen ideal within. They came forth and saved me as I performed the 3 alluring offerings. And those 3 alluring offerings are Arati, which is daily invocation, and Puja, which is ceremonial worship, and Bhajan, which is chanting the divine names. So in these ways, he experienced special communion with the ultra-cosmic Trinity. And we will take both of those 2 teachings up at our next class. So let me go ahead and close with a prayer. Om Bhadram Karnibhihi Sriniyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyema Akshabirya Jatraha Stirairangaish Tushtavam Sastanavir Vyashema Devahitam Yadayahu. May we hear with these ears what is good and spiritual. May we see with our eyes what is noble and uplifting. And may we, while worshiping the Lord and Mother of the universe, with healthy minds and bodies, live a life that is beneficial to ourselves and to all others. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all living beings. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. So let me pause here and give you a rundown of what's happening next. Here we go.